So yeah,
Good
last week.
morning. Welcome.
Oh,
Welcome to the Light on Suitability podcast. I'm your host, Elizabeth Comeau, with co-hosts Joe Haytas and Dean Laureles. I don't ever know if I say that right.
you got it.
Laureles. I don't know. Laureles. Anyway, let's get away from the Spanish. We're all very excited to be here. We're excited to have Dean back. I'm always glad that Joe's here. It is his book after all. And we're closing in on the book. We're almost done. We're on chapter strategy 34, closing statements. And Joe's perspective in his book, it's all about the victim. And I tend to agree. I have a couple of other little things that I do depending on the case. Obviously, we need to make some adjustments on that. So I want to turn it over to you, Joe, and get your perspective on closing statements. And this is obviously there's 3 closing statements. We won't necessarily know how to approach. We kind of talked about the DA's closings and what we thought they should be doing better. But today it's probably all about you and I's role and our client's role in these closing statements. So why don't you tell us your perspective on what makes a great closing statement from both the lawyer's point of view and then your client's point of view?
Sure. Well, the closing statement, actually, the chapter in the book is geared for the incarcerated person's closing. And okay, picture this. You have to take it in context. The whole hearing has been about the incarcerated person and their change and everything they've been doing, all the way from the social history through parole plans. It's up to this point, it's been all about the change or the lack thereof. So you get to the closing and you can say anything you want. And commissioners, they say, well, if you want to clarify something in the risk assessment, blah, blah, blah. No, whatever you did, you hurt somebody, and this is the opportunity to say in your own way that you're sincerely sorry. Now, with a caveat, if you're not ready to do that yet, then obviously you can't do it. But you're at a hearing and you're trying to be found suitable, so you want to show the commissioners who you are. Show the commissioners how you feel about the harm of the victim. And the victim could still be suffering. The family of the victim can still be suffering. These things go on sometimes generationally. So this is the opportunity to express remorse, express your understanding of victim impact. And yeah, you can talk about your change, but I would only spend a small amount on the change and then talk about the change as part of the reason why you're feeling about the victim and the ripple effect about why you're feeling that, because you've really explored yourself, you've explored the victim and everything that's happened, and you want to make amends, and this is one of the ways of showing it. So it's, at the end of the day, it shouldn't be about you. It should be about the victim and the harm that you caused.
I really agree with you on that as well. And that's something that I make sure that they have in their letter. So I send them a letter saying, here's the template for you to follow. That's my suggested template. And that template always includes the portion of remorse, because if you don't get asked or if something didn't come out quite right. And so I always tell them to have something in there again, like you said, it's sort of a mini letter of apology mixed in with impact, so that the commissioners know that it can really help to mitigate as well if you've got some other issues. And I also, not permit is not the right word, but suggest, recommend, allow. Again, allow is not the best word because it's their closing. I give them statements. I give them a suggestion. I'm sorry. And I tell them, like in 12 steps says, take what you need and leave the rest. But I strongly encourage them to include something about remorse. And so, what is remorse? What am I talking about? I'm talking about amends. So, and I do allow them to, if they follow my suggestion, to make a statement on how they've made it right or attempted to make it right. They can't make it, it's a living amends, obviously. So, and that also will demonstrate that they've worked and understand the 12 steps. So, if you're mentioning amends, that naturally implicates step 8, step 9. And so you can also sort of fix what might not have gone well. And I don't mind a brief, like you said, a statement of offender change in addition to any of that. And I really like them to focus on, if they're going to do that, again, shift to step 12 and how they're planning to continue giving back and continue doing the work that they're doing, that this work isn't just for getting a grant of parole. This is a lifestyle that they've embraced, and they understand that it's pivotal to success on parole. It's not, if they drop it, if they're only doing this performatively, then they have a strong likelihood of being returned to prison, because most of the guys that and gals that we see that are returned, they had blind spots, and the blind spots were not revealed during the parole hearing or during their parole preparation. In the 10 years that they were preparing, they're just, preparing for like a bar exam is a great example, because a bar exam has no basis in reality to the practice of law, like sworn, and now the client comes into your office and you're like, wow, that contracts and torts book has nothing to help me here. I don't have no clue, especially a lot of these more academic universities, and no slight on them. I mean, I would love to go to Harvard or Yale, but a lot of those grads came out without any skills. So they are very good critical thinkers, but they just didn't have basic skills. And so that's another thing that I see is a blind spot. And how did I get off on this tangent? Again, basically saying, we want to make sure that I really want my clients to be the person they are in that chair. And if I saw them on the yard talking, and if I could be a fly in the wall talking to somebody else on the yard and they didn't see me, is that person still the same? And the person that they speak to at their hearing, is that person the same I would see out in the community if, again, I could be a fly on the wall? So that closing statement, well, it's not going to do everything like that. If you work it up that way and you really know the 12 steps to be able to use it in a very lifestyle conversational approach, it can just add a little bit of icing on the cake. So you can get granted parole without icing. You just need a cake. And the cake has to taste reasonable. It can be a little salty, it can be a little sweet, but it definitely has to, taste like cake. And that's sort of the grant of parole. The icing is just that nice statement that just really lets the commissioners know that if they grant parole, they can feel confident in what they're doing. But let's hear from Dean. I'm really interested in hearing his thoughts, and then we'll go from there.
Okay. It's interesting. Joseph, I think that what you're saying that goes in it, spot on. That's what needs to be there. But just as important as to what they're saying, how they're saying it. So that's huge as well. It's the last thing that the commissioners are going to hear before they go into their deliberation. So it is significant. In my own experience, it was I had the deputy commissioner, and when I went to the board, it was in person. We didn't have the Zoom and all that back then. It was in person. And the deputy commissioner slid, because it's a long table, he slid all the way in front of me and sat directly in front of me and did like this and looked at me straight on. I had a piece of paper where I had written down what I wanted to say. I took the piece of paper and I set it down on the table and I focused on him and I spoke to him and just made that eye contact. The commissioner was off, on his computer doing whatever he was doing, but that deputy commissioner was locked in. And so it's a lot of guys ask me, should I write something down? Should I read it? I tell them no. Speak from your heart. Go over this often enough that you have bullet points in your head that you want to hit. And those are the things that you speak on. Now, every time you practice this and you're walking the yard and you're going over this in your head, it's going to come out different, but you're still covering the points that you want to cover. And that's important. And I think it's a big difference when you're speaking something from the heart as to reading it off a piece of paper. It comes across as more genuine. And that was what I did. I spoke from the heart. And, there was a number of things I covered, my transition, remorse, what prison was to me. And when I started off, I told him, I said, look, I'm not ashamed to say prison has been good for me. This is where I grew up. I became a responsible adult. I got right in my faith. I got my education. I learned some trades. This is where I grew up. Prison has been good for me. And then I went further into the remorse and things like that. But it was just being able to have that genuine conversation. So as much as it's important what you're saying and what you're covering. And like I said, Joseph, what you talked about was perfect because those areas need to be brought up. But how are you doing it? Are you coming across with authenticity, or is it rehearsed and you're reading it off of paper? So I think that definitely makes a difference.
I would just say, just to some contrast for that into a broader picture, you're somebody that could pull that off, Dean. You're very well spoken, but we tend to get 10, and you do too, but we tend to get 10 very different clients, and some of these clients they're very nervous, they have memory issues, or they tend to talk too much. And when they talk too much without something to tether them to, like I say in my letter to them, I prefer you to write it down and read it, because if you're someone that is going to run off with the mouth, I said you can ruin a really good presentation with the wrong thing said in a closing statement. And I happen to be one of those people that is much more confident with something written down. And so if it's sincerely written down and they've spoken from the heart and they followed my formula, I'm really okay with it. And a lot of the commissioners are okay with it too, because they know then when they have a written statement, it's going to be 5 minutes and not a rambling 30. And a lot of the times when people I have some very well-spoken clients who can pull that off, but it can come across scripted as well. And so at least if it is in front of them scripted, because they're tethering it for self-confidence, the commissioners already recognize that, rather than they've rehearsed something. And I know you've said, just do bullet points. I'm not so good at that. I'm really not. But at times, so the commissioners tend to like it because they know they're not going to get a rambling speech. My clients like it because they're like, how do I do a closing? And they're very nervous about public speaking. So when there's not that question and answer, and it's just them and all eyes on them, and that can help. So if you're somebody like Dean and very confident and very able to do that without coming across as stilted in it, as if you've rehearsed it over and over and over, versus a really heartfelt something written down, that way you can also make sure you hit all the points that I'm telling them to hit, which is make sure you say you're sorry again, make sure you name their names in your statement if possible, make sure you explain what you did as to why you're sorry and the impact, and then move to maybe amends, and then move to maybe offender change. And I limit their statement as well. I tell them no more than a page, depending on how you write, or maybe 4 paragraphs, because again, the commissioners, especially if you're number 10, you're Friday at 10:30 or something, and we've had the whole week of the commissioners just hearing one after, and victims and this, and so again, the commissioners, I don't know, it doesn't really matter, but I just tell them, you don't want to ruin something that's been great, and then you get up there and then you do a rant, and then your brain,
Right.
we all start, and our
Elizabeth,
just mind bleeds the truth, and then boom, we've uttered something out of our mouth, and it's
you know
been
what?
like
You're
the
both
death.
you're both right. You're both
Yeah.
right. You know what? I think what Dean said was spot on. But I tell them, the incarcerated people, that if you can pull off what Dean said, that's ideal. To just get up there and speak it from the heart. But first, you got to do the work.
Mm.
You got to know like the beginning and the middle and end of your speech, your closing statement rather. And if you can speak it from the heart, that's the best way of doing it. However, let's face it, this is a very tense situation, especially for the incarcerated people, and they're nervous. They tend to forget. So I tell them the first thing you should do is write it down, and with all the modifications, and then practice it. Listen to yourself as you speak it and enunciate it. And then if you have to read it in the hearing, read it as if you're speaking it, meaning, pause at the proper places, speed up, slow down, emphasize certain words. You have to be that familiar with it if you've written it, and you're not there to show it as being particularly prepared, like it's like the incarcerated person, they're damned if they do and they're damned if they don't. If they come in there and they're disorganized, they're going to say, oh, you didn't prepare. But if you read it like you're really speaking it, then they're going to say, oh, that was prepared and contrived, so just be yourself and read it, but read it from the heart,
Right.
like Elizabeth is saying.
Mhm.
And know it well enough, be familiar with it enough that you can, slow down, speed up, give certain words more feeling than others. It's so you're both right, but
Yeah.
It depends on who you are too. A person has to know their strengths and their limitations, and if they can do it. So, and again, it's so important that if you're not ready to be remorseful, then don't try to do that. Oh, and one other thing too, if you're going to talk about your change, because this is all about change, give a little background and say, I took Lighthouse 9, and this really helped me because, and when when I got Dean's letter, it changed me, or whatever,
Right.
And say, this was an influence on me, and then I started, programming, or I did this, making amends, and from there, things took off, and I've been heavily involved in programming, since 2020 or whatever. So you can mention that stuff, but mention it in the context of how, how you started to change, who influenced you, and the trajectory that you're on, how it developed. So yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's good. And Elizabeth, I appreciate your perspective too, and you're right. Because not everybody can do that. So there's if you've got to write it down, there's nothing wrong with writing it down. I didn't. I prefer teaching guys not to write it down, but I do have some guys who need to write it down. But I agree with how what you're saying and what Joseph's saying about the way emphasize. Look at the when you write it down, look at the commas, know where to stop, know when to emphasize on a word, so that you're bringing something that is heartfelt, that's legitimate. I just last week I had a client send me a 4-page closing statement, and I went, no, this is too much. And he went, and it was off in left field. I mean, we're chasing squirrels. I thought, no, you can't do this. A page, a page and a half, because I think one thing too about the commissioners is that this is near the end of the hearing, and you don't want to just ramble on and on and on and on and keep them going because you're reading off a piece of paper. So you want to have something that's detailed, specific, and brief, that hits the spots, that relays the message you want to relay, but doesn't get carried away. And then let the commissioners. Now, when I went, it was funny because outside of the deputy commissioner who leaned in when I was talking, it didn't, and this is something I think the commissioners have a habit of doing. They look really uninterested. They just kind of like, okay, we're good. And then they get up and they go their way. And so it's like, that's something I've noticed, and I think is just something that they do. But I know that what I said mattered because they were listening, and so I think as long as you cover those points, we talked about remorse in there. And a lot of guys, if I ask them point blank, what is remorse to you? They'll tell me, it's that deep sorrow, regret that you have when you've done something wrong. Okay, don't care. That's the company line. You learn that in a self-help group. What is remorse to you? In your situation with what you've done, and having them apply the remorse to themselves. After all, the hearing is about them. I don't want to hear what they can regurgitate out of a self-help group. I want to hear about how it applies to you in your situation with the crime that you committed. When did you start feeling remorse? What does remorse mean to you? And that helps to go in the letter when they can break it down and identify it, because it's much more clear. It's not just that company line.
I've actually had commissioners too, and I've had clients, what they've done? They've followed my advice, but they've also followed their heart. And at the beginning, then they ask to speak, and they'll say something from the heart, maybe like how the hearing went or something like this, or they might address a concern that they later followed up on. They remembered something, and then they've got, and they said, now I have something prepared that I'd also like to read to you. And I've had commissioners say expressly, we really appreciate that you wrote down your statement. And I know it's because they don't have to sit at 20 minutes, and then they don't like to interrupt the client, even when they're going off on a tangent. Like, they'll let them go off on a tangent for 10 minutes. But after that, if you're still off on a tangent and not addressing suitability, they'll literally say, has nothing to do with whether you're suitable or not now. And so you need to wrap it up. And you never want that to happen either. But I think too, like, the thing about them not listening or not looking or not seeming like they're listening, or they're typing stuff, they're already typing up their closing decision. Oftentimes, all of a sudden, that will be included. You'll think they're not listening, but then they're going to use something against you in their closing. Is like, wow, we thought you weren't listening. But they will hear something if it's said in, I don't know what the word is, just imprecisely or whatever. So again, that impreciseness. Like, I had a client last week who said, do you know all the steps? And he said, no, I don't. And I'm like, yeah, you do. And he just didn't hear it, but he had spoken about every single step during the hearing. Unfortunately, this commissioner, and I won't mention it because I plan on filing a request for decision review and a habeas if necessary. Twice he's done this to me. A perfect delivery, a perfect presentation, met all the criteria, denied parole because the victims were there. And I'm very disturbed by that. But it has nothing to do with my closing statement. And I did mix that up. Sorry about that, Joe. Yeah, I mixed up the chapter. This is about your client's closing statement, not our closing statement. But I think a very important part, because it can be sort of a nothing, but if it doesn't go well, like I tell my clients, sometimes it can sink your boat. You might have been getting a grant of parole, and then you said something stupid in there, and they change their minds. Not very often, but sometimes if you say the wrong things, or you get off and you start crying about the trial process, and how, you've managed to script everything correctly with answering the questions, and then you go off on your poor me story in the closing or something, which I really do. I mean, I send a letter to my clients telling them what my philosophy is and why I have them do it. But yeah, the closings. And I don't know, there doesn't seem to be a rule that is limited to 10 minutes. And there are a few commissioners that say it's limited to 10 minutes. I've had commissioners say that they can't even address what the DA has said, like as in rebuttal. And I think that's also wrong. But, you get these commissioners that don't know what they're doing. Anything else, Joe? Did we cover everything to your satisfaction?
It's not about my satisfaction. It's okay. So funny. No.
Are you pleased,
I
Joe?
believe. I believe it's okay. Yeah, we covered all the main points, I believe, and there is that I don't want to call it, like, for lack of a better term, a schism between, do I write it or do I speak it from the heart? But actually, both. I mean, you want to be prepared when you go in. You don't want to just say, "Oh, is it my turn to speak?" No, you know what? This is something you have to have written on, and it should be kind of a compilation of what everything's been up till this point, and it's very important. But if you can either read it from the heart, more importantly, speaking it from the heart, I mean, that is like totally the best way. But in reality, that's not going to happen. These, most of the incarcerated people are not, schooled in public speaking, if you will. So, and actually, that's another reason why, if you can speak it from the heart, it looks even better, because those are your true emotions, and that's what it should be. It should be that. But in the tension, in the hearing room, you gotta, speak it how you're really feeling, and that's not an easy thing to do for somebody who doesn't. They're not in hearings all the time.
Right.
I mean, this could be the first time they're speaking about their crime to somebody since their court, 25 years ago. So, I mean, well, other than the risk assessment, of course, but what I'm saying is, they're actually speaking it out loud for the first time in years. So, you want to be prepared. You want to write it down, and you can write it down, put it in the drawer, and if you want, but get something on paper.
Mm-hmm.
So you're both right. You're both right.
And I really like it, because I was kind of thinking that Dean would have a different perspective about this, which is great that he's here. And I think that, when and if you ever do that third edition, or for the edition that you're working on, the new one, this is kind of a nice contrast, because it's both perspectives could work depending on the client.
Right.
So really good. What about next week, Joe? Strategy 35.
Yeah, we're getting towards the end. Gee, I don't want.
We're gonna have to come up with another. I like these book projects. I really do. I really like the conversation. I don't know exactly how to come up with the next one, but I think these book projects are sort of fun. Something useful. Maybe Dean's got a suggestion. Michael had a book that he had worked on, a workbook that he made, but I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, I wish that I had, been here for the beginning of the book, working through the 36 strategies, because I know that there's probably a lot of areas that are, really significant. And from what I've seen and read and heard from others, it covers everything. It's valid.
Everything.
There's so much there. And what I like about today, Elizabeth, is that we can have different ideas and talk about these things, and they're both valid. And the thing about it is that it provides people with more options.
Yeah.
Just so that it's like, okay, you can do it this way or you can do it this way. Which way is suited best for you?
For you.
And yeah, exactly. So I think that that's good because it lets people know that, hey, there's more than just one way of doing something,
And
so
if it would have just been Joe and I sometimes, sometimes we disagree, but Joe and I would have just been mentioning the writing it down,
yeah.
and then we wouldn't have had this other perspective. So I'm really happy about that. Maybe we just go and start from the beginning. Who knows? I don't know.
Yeah, Joe, we need you to write that third book so we can add more to it. We can discuss it some more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm working on one, and hopefully in a couple months it's going to be done. So I'm in the home stretch right now of completing it.
Good. Okay.
Yeah. Well, we'll have put our thinking caps on for an interim book or cycle back to strategy 1.
Mm.
Oh, jeez. Okay.
Joe's
You're the boss, Elizabeth. You're the boss.
No. Come, you guys, think about it. We've got a couple weeks anyway to think about it. I am, by the way, not available. I am going to, I might as well just tell you. Next Sunday, I'm driving to Vegas. The following Sunday, I'm driving home from Vegas. So the next show is June 8th. So we've got tons of time to think about what we're going to do. It's my husband's big event, and we're going for a week in Vegas. Can you imagine? You can only do it if you're sober people like us. If you do it another way, it's not possible.
Yeah. So June 8th will be the next time that we have a show?
June 8th, because I'm driving to Vegas on Sunday and I'm driving home from Vegas on Sunday. I don't know that it's ideal to do it in my car on my phone. So we'll just pass. We'll just give everybody a break.
Okay.
But also thinking about, sharing this with a wider audience, because I really did it for the loved ones to help them understand it. But what I found was, and I am saying this, live, which is fine. I find that my clients don't share it with their family members, even though I put it in the letter, I mention it. And it's like, it makes me not sad. It makes me wonder, how committed people are to helping their loved ones be found suitable, or my clients not sharing it with their loved ones. Why? When they could, or maybe they just don't. The other thing it brings up is, are they really reading my letters very closely? And I'll tell you, and this is kind of a tangent, the clients that come to my meeting with their materials, even if we never get to them, and with my letters highlighted, notes in the margins, a page of questions, these guys are motivated. And I'm looking at them like, you want to go home. You want to go home. Not just because I've got this great letter. It's just I'm the lawyer that they got. This is the letter that they got from me, the letters. And this is the effort that they're showing me that they're making. And I see the contrast between those guys. I'm like, this guy is near the end zone here, or trying to get near the end zone. And then somebody else who just comes with nothing, disheveled, not caring, slumped in his chair. It's really a difference. I just see there is a formula to success on these things, and it is a personality. And sometimes these clients, they do really need to just be born again. And the Bible says, the New Testament says, born again. What does that mean? You are different. You're different. Yeah. And that's what the panel is expecting too. But
they want to see change. And I was even at a seminar with Jennifer Schaefer when she was the ED. And she spoke about one of the things that they look for being changed. That's significant. It has to be. Yesterday we were at Pleasant Valley. We're going to be going back again on the 31st. We're doing a 6-hour BPH workshop.
Wow.
And we're going to do mock hearings and things like that. And there's a lot of information out there. And there's so much with the guys themselves. It's like, you talk about that transformation. Some of these guys, they're hungry for it. We can see it.
Yeah.
You know, just
Yeah.
there, and there are some who are ready to come home. They just need the opportunity to go to the board.
Yeah.
You know, and their family members. There's a number of clients that I have whose family members call, and they are so uninformed
Yeah.
of the process and what's happening, and a lot of them are still dealing with a level of guilt that
Mm.
their family members. And I've had a number of clients, and when they call, and I'll talk to the mother, the father, whoever it is, and they're, what could I have done different? You know, why didn't I see this? You know, and the first thing I tell them, look, this isn't about you. You know,
Yeah.
it's not about you. It's about
Yeah.
your son and the decisions he made, and that's where it's at. You are not to blame. You never took a class. You never read a book on this topic, if one
Yeah.
exists. So
Yeah.
it is not about you. And most of them end up in tears and tell me thank you,
Yeah.
because it's the first time that they heard that it's not your fault. You know, so there's it's
Yeah,
powerful.
because of the choices that were made, but also, you know, if they do want to do that deeper work and start working and looking at their own character defects and how they contributed, and that's okay to look at that, but
Mhm.
that's their own journey, and that's not part of this parole process. I've had
Right.
a mother write an amazing letter in support of her son. And
Mhm.
she took responsibility for her role, not in a way that diminished the choices that he made, just explaining the diminished culpability of youth as compared to adults and her contribution to that diminished culpability of youth as compared to adults. But ultimately, the hallmark features of youth were his own choices, and those
Right.
were the choices he made. I thought it was a beautiful letter. I thought it was such a, you know, such a subtle diplomatic way of saying, like, I do realize that if I had been a better mother, this might not have happened. But
Right.
ultimately, the parole hearing is about the choices that were ultimately made, because we all know that the same son and the different family having the same challenges might not have made those choices. And a lot of times, like gang members, even some of the gang members, you know, they don't choose to be the violent enforcer. They just choose to be the trafficker of the drugs for the gang, or the one that delivers the messages, but he's never willing to really do the violence. And
Mhm.
so you do see that sometimes, you know. But anyway, way off on tangents. I personally love tangents, though. I know Joe does, but as well. So no, you don't love them.
He's like,
He's just saying sure. Let me cut you guys loose. I look forward to seeing
You
you on
know
June
what?
8th.
I know. Time out. I know what I can call the next book. Being Elizabeth Comeau.
Oh boy.
That's what,
That's what we need. Oh, by the way, I'd love to go in with you to Pleasant Valley on one Saturday.
I would love to have you with us.
I just need a heads up. I'd love to give my I have this thing I've been sort of working on in my head about going into the prisons, and that's really talking about the 12 steps, but not from a check the box thing, but a true spiritual awakening point of
Uh-huh.
view, and a real life point of view, not just a parole thing. But I'm working on it. I don't have it formulated, but I guess under pressure I could pull something off and some ideas there, because I really think that 12 steps is the key to success on parole for the most of my clients, myself, and everybody else in the world, because it's such a powerful program in some ways. Does it have its limitations and flaws? Of course, but I think it's just a really great, it's a community, it's
Yeah.
support, and it really does make you take a good hard look at yourself and what you need to do to get connected to your source of who you really are, which is light and love.
Yeah. And they will
I
have.
am doing I do have a blog that I've started to create for my website. It's not up because I don't have anybody that knows how to make websites or add it to my website, but
Yeah.
I created a blog on how the 12 steps meets A Course in Miracles, and I have a bunch of blog posts that I really want to put on there, but
Okay.
It's getting there.
So let me know when you are ready to go, and we can get you cleared and get you in. The guys would love to have you.
When do you go in?
We're going to go in. The next time we're going in is for the BPH seminar, which is on the 31st.
That I'm in Vegas, but then when do you do them every Saturday, or is it once a month?
We used to go every Saturday, but the problem is that we're not funded. And so we're driving 3 hours north up and back, and then hotels, and we just got to a point where, so we cut it back to where we go in once, twice a month now.
Oh, okay.
But once you get back from Vegas, we'll set something up and let you know when we're going back in. And I know that they'd have 1,000 questions for you. And just so the both of you know, they asked me who was my top 5 attorneys. And you both are on that list. So they thought, that's awesome. So for them to get to meet you, Elizabeth, would be great.
Yeah, I don't get a lot of Pleasant Valley. And the thing about Pleasant Valley is I think there's only one programming yard, maybe 2. The rest are, unfortunately, when I come to my hearings. The one thing about Pleasant Valley is a lot of my clients are very accountable, and they sit down and they go, I'm not ready. I'm still gang involved, or I just got a 115, or I'm just struggling. I just can't seem to get out of this pattern. And they waive. So I get 10 hearings and 2 of them go. It's a very interesting thing versus SADF when those guys are not ready, but they're all going, because it's like, okay, sure, let's do it. But I really like the accountability of Pleasant Valley, and I've had a lot of guys come out of there stuck and then transformed, and then write me and go, I got out. I'm doing all this stuff now, and I finally did it, and I went over to Avenal, which they all don't want to go to Avenal for particular reasons. And I tell them, that's the way. If you want to do that as a gang member, that's one way you could really show the panel that you're committed to your non-gang lifestyle. But that's a topic for another day.
Mm.
And hopefully you all know what I'm talking about. So I would love to go. Just tell me the next one after the 31st. How do I get clearance? I'm already cleared to go in, but I'd have to have clearance for that day as well with you.
Yeah, just to sign in. And it's simple. The AW is actually the associate warden is the warden. He was the warden of the prison my wife was in.
Okay.
So for 16 years. And so he knows her really well. And he's part of the reason she went back to court and got immediate release. So, he clears us real. We were cleared within days to go in. And it's been great. We love going there. We're planning on moving because it's to be closer. So,
wow, to be closer to Colingo, then you'll be closer to me.
Yeah. One step further, why don't you do the podcast from that seminar, that get together? Take an hour or whatever, 30 minutes, and do it live from Pleasant Valley. And you could have guest people, if they permit the incarcerated people to give some comments. That'd be wonderful, Elizabeth.
That's a great idea.
And Dean,
you just set that up for me, Joe. You just go right on ahead.
What?
You just go right ahead and set that up for me.
Well, no, why not? Why not? You can just bring your laptop.
You need internet access.
You
need internet access, and a good internet access.
Okay.
Well, we meet over Teams. So there's times that in the chapel or in the classrooms they have Teams, and because part of our scaling back from going there 4 times a month was to be able to offer services through Teams. So they do have the setup to be able to do that. So I mean, yesterday that's what we did. We had our meeting over Teams.
Wow, you didn't go down there?
No. We went 2 weeks prior. We went down there. We went in, and then yesterday was over Teams. I think next week might be over Teams, and then on 31st we go back in. So,
that's amazing, because so many more people would be willing, like attorneys in particular, would be willing to offer their time to give a 1 hour, presentation.
Yeah. And so it would be, I mean, imagine having a room filled with 50, 60 guys, because we'll be in the gym, and having the big screen there and being able to speak for a half hour, an hour, 45 minutes, and to share your 2 cents on the board process and the thing. I mean, they would have quite. It would be awesome. That would be
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. I'll go down with you for sure
Okay.
and participate in whatever way I'd be interested in doing that. All good. All good, you guys. Thanks a lot.
All right.
And thank you. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So I'll see you guys June 8th
Mhm.
for the Strategy 35 close. I don't know what it's about.
If you get denied, what should you do if you're denied?
Oh, beautiful. Okay, great. I love it.
That's
Thanks,
going to
Joe.
be a new section for me, thankfully. It's like, I didn't have to
Oh, yeah.
experience that.
Yes.
I have some great ones from the last 2 weeks because I've got they should never have been denied. And in fact, I want to send you those transcripts, Dean, because I'm floored. And I wonder sometimes if I have a blind spot, but I'm floored.
Yeah, I'd like to look at that just to see what's there.
Yep. I want to send them to you for your 2 cents and just say, nah, this one's worthy, but I don't think so. I really don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good.
Okay, you guys.
Well, have a good Sunday.
You too.
All
Enjoy.
right. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right. Take care, you guys.
Yep.